Hello and welcome to this News 9 special. Today marks day 20 since Hamas carried out deadly attacks on southern Israel. Here's the latest update from the Warfront. What we understand right now is that Israeli troops and tanks have briefly entered Gaza. It has been a strategy on the part of the IDF to enter Gaza and carry out raids as well as limited objectives and move back quickly into Israeli territory. Meanwhile, Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip as well. At least 33 people have been killed in the latest airstrikes in Gaza. Over 7,000 Palestinians have been killed, including 2,913 children. Hamas operatives have been killed in the airstrikes is what the Israeli military has claimed. They have said that they have eliminated some of the top leadership in carrying out the audacious South Israel invasion. 27 media personnel have been killed in the Israel-Hamas war, and this is according to the Press Freedom Group. Hamas delegation will now also visit Moscow. This is according to information coming in from the Russian Foreign Ministry as Russia tries to broker a peace deal between Israel, Hamas, the Arab world, as well as with China and Iran's backing. Now, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow for talks on the release of foreign hostages, including Russian citizens. Senior Hamas member Abu Marzouk was among those attending the talks. Issues related to ensuring the evacuation of Russian and other foreign citizens from the territory of Palestinian enclave were also discussed. Hamas released a statement in which it praised the efforts of Russia's Vladimir Putin and foreign ministry to end what is called the crimes of Israel that are supported by the West. Meanwhile, it is important to note that Russia had ties to all key players in the Middle East, including Israel, Iran, the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas, the group that controls Gaza. Russia can be seen forming a new platform to resolve global issues along with China and Iran. China had engaged with the Taliban and also brought about a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So is the United States' monopoly on global issues being challenged? That is the big question that is being asked with the coming together of Russia, China and Iran. Both the US and Russia have already vetoed each other's proposals at the Security Council. Moscow has repeatedly blamed the current crisis on the failure of US diplomacy and called for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the resumption of talks aimed at finding a peace settlement. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby criticized the visit, suggesting that it is not time to support Hamas.
I can't speak for their travel habits or with their conversations with the Russians. Our message to any other nation around the world is this is not a time to be supporting Hamas's ability to continue to kill Israelis, and it's certainly not a time, or any nation out there that wants to be involved should look for ways to be involved to help Israel defend itself and to help get humanitarian assistance in. So we'll see what comes of the conversation.
Well, the United States has taken a decisive action in response to attacks on its troops in the last week. What we understand is that in a statement that was released earlier today, US President Joe Biden ordered military strikes against two facilities in Syria. These facilities were being used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the IRGC, and Iran-backed groups, as confirmed by the Pentagon. The Pentagon further emphasized that the United States will not tolerate attacks against its personnel and will vigorously defend its interests. Moreover, it stated that additional measures would be taken if attacks by Iran's proxies continue, making it clear that Iranian-backed attacks against US forces are deemed unacceptable and must stop. These developments mark a significant escalation in the tensions between the United States and Iran. The situation is rapidly evolving and the international community is closely monitoring the situation for any further developments. Meanwhile, 900 US troops are being deployed in the Middle East.
As part of our efforts to deter a broader conflict and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities, I can confirm that since our initial force posture announcement, approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States. Deployed and deploying units include a terminal high-altitude area defense battery from Fort Bliss, Texas, Patriot batteries from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Patriot and Avenger batteries from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and associated air defense headquarters elements from Fort Bliss and Fort Cavados, Texas. While I won't talk specific deployment locations for these forces, I can confirm that they are not going to Israel and that, again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities.
Now, based on precise IDF and ISA intelligence, IDF fighter jets struck 3 senior Hamas operatives in Daraj Tufa battalion. The battalion's operatives played a significant role in the invasion and murderous attack against Israel on October 7th and is considered to be the most significant brigade of the Hamas terrorist organization. Senior Hamas operatives Ibrahim Jabbar, Rifat Abbas and Tarek Maruf were eliminated in these airstrikes. 3 Hamas operatives have been killed by the IDF. The IDF has in fact tweeted out about the commanders who were eliminated from the brigade that is believed to have carried out the strikes against southern Israel. IDF airstrikes have said to have pinpointedly targeting the Hamas leadership and have eliminated 3 more commanders who were responsible for the southern Israel invasion. Meanwhile, satellite images have been released showing various locations in North Gaza, comparing areas before and after Israeli airstrikes in response to a Hamas attack. Images show devastated structures and terrain. These visuals coming in show the kind of destruction that Gaza has seen, especially after October 7th. Several Gaza neighborhoods have been pulverized after the Israeli bombing. Israel has been bombing several areas of Gaza which have been used for rocket attacks and launches from the high-rises that are there in these areas. Meanwhile, in the collateral damage that has occurred, many of the residential complexes have also been destroyed by the IDF to stop any sort of launches taking place from them, and at the same time in its efforts to target the Hamas leadership. Well, in a United Nations RWA camp for displaced Palestinians in Gaza, residents are facing dire conditions. A displaced Gazan shared that despite being safe from bombardment, they are suffering from food and water shortages. They are forced to drink polluted water and have access to only half a loaf of bread every 2 days. According to United Nations officials, UN RWA workers are doing their best to distribute aid, but there are severe shortages in food supplies, fuel and medication. However, the recent situation is becoming quite alarming in Gaza. But moving on, in a recent footage that was released, explosions, smoke and flares are visible near the Israel-Gaza border. Loudspeakers were blaring color red, signifying incoming rockets in southern Israel. Israel confirmed its ground forces had entered Gaza overnight to target Hamas, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu indicating preparations for a potential ground invasion. This escalation follows nearly 3 weeks of Israeli airstrikes triggered by a mass killing spree in southern Israel by Iranian-backed Hamas militants, worsening the situation in the besieged Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, Israeli ground forces operated in northern Gaza, attacking multiple Hamas targets before withdrawing, marking the largest incursion in the current conflict. According to Israel's army radio, the efforts are on the part of the IDF to target those who were behind the October 7th invasion of southern Israel and the destruction that was caused by them. Now, the video footage showed armored vehicles in action with confirmed locations matching satellite maps. The incursion, part of preparations for the future combat stages, followed earlier localized ground operations. The soldiers have returned to Israeli territory. There was no immediate response from Hamas in Gaza regarding the incident. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces have released a video showing IDF fighter jets striking Hamas targets and Israeli naval soldiers targeting surface-to-air missile launch posts in Gaza. IDF stated they hit over 250 Hamas terror targets in the past 24 hours, including infrastructure command centers, tunnels, shafts, and rocket launchers in civilian areas. A rocket from Gaza struck a residential building in Israel's Rishon LeZion, south of Tel Aviv, injuring 2 people with glass and shrapnel wounds, according to Megan David Adom Ambulance Service. Now, it is being said that simultaneously, a camera of a news agency captured the footage of a rocket being intercepted over Tel Aviv. The incident highlights the ongoing tensions in the region, with residents facing the constant threat of rocket attacks and Israeli defense systems working to intercept incoming missiles. Hamas launched a rocket attack towards Eilat, a city in southern Israel, from the Gaza Strip, covering a long distance of 220 kilometers. The Israeli military confirmed the rocket hit an area in Eilat. There's no news yet on any injuries, making this the longest range attack since the conflict began on October 7th. Meanwhile, there are reports coming in that in the Jabalia refugee camp, there was a very sad event. An Israeli airstrike hit a house and took the lives of a mother, her 3 daughters and a baby boy. The father, who had experienced displacement in the past, refused to leave his home. He held his baby and said he would have moved if he faced with tanks. There have been many deaths due to Israeli strikes, but exact numbers are hard to confirm because reports from both sides conflict, as news agencies have been reporting. In Lebanon, elderly refugees who fled their homes during Israel's creation in 1948 say echoes of their own displacement when they witnessed the conflict in Gaza. Living in cramped camps, they long to return to their homeland. Palestinians in Lebanon remain stateless, unable to own property or access many jobs. The recent conflict in Gaza has reignited their hope for a homeland. Meanwhile, in Gaza, where many Palestinians live as refugees, people are forced to flee their homes again due to the ongoing Israeli airstrikes, adding to their long-standing struggles for stability and peace. Well, Israeli troops expelled a prominent Palestinian activist from his home in a key West Bank city. This action followed his hosting of a foreign journalist and well-known Israeli activist. Critics argued the military used the Israel-Hamas war as a pretext to remove Issa Amro from Hebron. Have a look at this report.
Friday prayers sound out in Ramallah, the West Bank's biggest city. But the faithful's prayers soon turned to protest against Israel's devastating strikes on Gaza. This woman says her whole family is there.
Shame for what is happening to them. They slaughtered children and women. We do not forgive the Arab countries because they let us down. They did not stand by us. They left us alone. I hope someone will listen. We don't need empty words. We need someone that stands by us.
And more feel that Hamas is doing just that. "We are your soldiers, Mohammed Daif," they chant, praising Hamas's military wing commander. The West Bank is not governed by Hamas, but by Fatah, the party that controls the Palestinian Authority, or PA. It's widely seen as weak, corrupt and ineffective, and now more than ever. The PA blames Israel and the West for its fragile legitimacy, growing by the day.
Don't forget, last September, Abu Mazen stood before the General Assembly. He had made it clear that the international community is failing the Palestinians, that the Palestinian Authority has the responsibility and obligation to protect its people, but Israel is making its actions null and void. Israel is putting hurdles.
There are other hurdles for the PA. In the 2 weeks since Hamas's attack on Israel, here in the West Bank, at least 80 people have been killed in confrontations with Israeli forces and armed Jewish settlers. On Thursday, an Israeli raid and airstrike on a refugee camp in the region killed 13 people, including 5 children. Anger here is growing. This group of protesters may be small, but it's enough for the Israeli military to take strong action.
Up on the hilltop you can see Israeli snipers. They've been shooting live rounds of ammunition to these protesters who've been burning tyres and throwing stones. So far the paramedics say 7 people have been shot, including one of their own.
The West Bank is not a major focus of the Israeli military response for now. But with the public losing even more faith in the Palestinian Authority and support for Hamas apparently growing, there is a fear here that that could soon change.
Well, on October 7th, kibbutz Be'eri became one of the first Israeli communities targeted by Hamas terrorists. It's been after 2 weeks now, and dozens of residents remain missing. Shockingly, authorities have yet to identify all the bodies.
Security is tight in kibbutz Be'eri today. But at dawn on the morning of October 7th, the army was nowhere to be seen. The more than 1,000 people living here were among the first to be attacked by Hamas fighters. They roamed the kibbutz for hours, firing machine guns, grenades, rocket launchers. The Hamas-led terrorists moved from house to house over hours, killing civilians or taking them hostage. Today, this kibbutz is deserted. All what's left are burnt, destroyed houses and a community in ruins. The Israeli authorities want the world to see this and hear from people who were there.
They burned the house on them, smoke them out. And when they finally opened the doors because they couldn't breathe anymore, they decided who's to live, who's to die.
Rami Gold was part of a small group defending the kibbutz. He said they fired till they ran out of bullets.
And I got to tell you that story because 2 angels came. 2 people from reserve soldiers. I have no idea where they came from. Came to us, gave us ammunition and a cell phone so we can call our families to tell them we're okay. And we kept on going, kept on fighting till it was dark, till the army arrived.
When the fighting stopped, emergency responders looking for survivors found scenes of horror.
She was butchered open. The stomach was small children, a boy and a girl, hands tied to the back and tortured. And I'll say tortured now, yes, I'll say it. The father was without an eye. They took out his eye. The mother a breast was cut off. And while the children were brutally attacked, and they are sitting in the middle and eating the food of the holiday food, holiday meal that this family was supposed to eat.
Physical evidence of what happened at places around the country arrives here at a makeshift morgue in central Israel. These are some of the up to 200 unaccounted for people. More are still being found.
We are working day and night in shifts, trying to identify each and every one.
This is hard because people were disfigured, mutilated, burned.
We are here doing what we're doing because we think this is a holy mission. For us, identifying the last casualties and all of the civilians that got killed is so important. It's for us, we want to give them their final respect.
Families waiting to bury their dead and those who saw what happened are angry as well as bereft. At kibbutz Be'eri, Hamas killed more than 100 people, around 10% of the community. Emergency responder Yossi Landau, who saw the horror, says Hamas cannot be part of the future.
We went through a lot. We went through the Holocaust. We went through a lot. We'll be strong. The world is supporting us. Yes, we want the peace. It's a very important thing, the peace. Yes, but not with Hamas.
Peace seems a faraway prospect, here in the ruins of kibbutz Be'eri.
Well, the recent Hamas terror attacks have raised concerns among Israelis. This is leading to few to contemplate leaving the country due to worries about their safety and frustration with their government's perceived inability to protect them.
Shani could be living her happiest life. She and her friend Noah both recently became mothers for the first time. But being safe as Jews in Israel no longer feels like a given.
I'm 33 years old. I never felt like I need to be ready to go. Israel is my country, is my home. It was always like history, was always stories that happened in the past that never happen again. But now, now it's our life.
They want to be able to leave if they have to, so they're organizing paperwork for their babies.
Carmi doesn't have a passport yet, so we're preparing that. Earlier his vaccinations, that won't hold us up from leaving if we will need to leave.
The women's conversation revolves around the question of whether to stay or go. They say many people are torn.
Israel is made of us, the Jewish people, and if we all leave, nobody will be left. And it's also very sad to think about it.
Here in Tel Aviv, hardly anyone feels like swimming. The mood is somber. Everyone is on edge.
This is our country. We don't have any other place. So, yes, I'm scared, I'm afraid, but I'm not leaving, never.
A lot of conceptions we had and stories that we told ourselves about what gives us security just broke 2 weeks ago. And now we are trying to establish new stories to tell ourselves what it means to be safe here in Israel.
These people are not alone in their concern.
Before October 7, a strong element of Israeli society was trust that the state could largely keep people safe despite the regional hostility. That has changed. A recent poll suggests that 2/3 of Israelis are extremely concerned or frightened, and more than 4/5 see the attack as a failure of the government.
Those poll numbers sound shocking, but are they? Dalia Scheindlin is a public opinion analyst focusing on peace and conflict research in Israel.
They are pretty shocking considering that it's very rare for Israelis to have any sort of consensus. This is a perennially divided society. It's been politically and socially divided since the start of statehood. But then again, we are in unusual times. And I think Israelis are going through that together in the sense that the state has let them down.
Getting out of Israel has been difficult since the attack. Many flights have been canceled. But along with foreigners, Israelis are leaving, even if only for a while. Noah and Shani don't know yet where they might go if they decide to leave.
Our considerations is does the government is pro-Israel, and the population, is it Muslim, like most Muslim, Christians, Jews, where we have an like a big Israeli community? Those will be the consideration we will take. It's ironic that now we need to find a safe place outside of Israel. And this is the big dilemma, because in our soul, we do feel safe here, but in reality, it's not safe.
Their dearest hope is to raise their babies in peace. But they say growing anti-Semitism worldwide means it is increasingly difficult to say where that might be.
Well, the health ministry in Gaza has issued a 212-page document which it said contained the names and ID numbers of more than 7,000 Palestinians killed during the Israeli bombardment of the enclave. Now, the ministry acted after U.S. President Joe Biden and the Israeli military questioned the casualty figures issued by the authorities in Gaza, which is controlled by the Islamist Hamas movement. Now, in a press conference held in Geneva, the Palestinian ambassador to United Nations, Ibrahim Qureshi, defended the latest Gaza death toll figures and criticized Biden for questioning the numbers.
We have the names and the addresses and the age of all those Palestinian martyrs. And now it comes to Biden, he have no confidence on anything, even on himself, because one time he said that he saw the pictures, after 2 hours he didn't saw. When he went to Israel to visit Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, he said this bombardment on Al-Ahli hospital, it's the other side. Then they discovered that it's not the same. So yesterday his statement that there is some civilians, but the numbers are not accurate, we will see.
As the opposite after extremist gangs in Israel killed Rabin, the Prime Minister.
And I asked the High Commissioner to ask the Israeli side to provide for him the names of the Israeli casualties. They are talking now about 1,400. What we are talking, we will bring all the names because we will follow. We will not leave those families who totally exterminated. We have to follow later for their compensation and for their right.
Doctors in Gaza say patients arriving at hospitals are showing signs of disease caused by overcrowding and poor sanitation after more than 1.4 million people fled their homes for temporary shelters under Israel's heaviest ever bombardment. Aid agencies have repeatedly warned of a health crisis in the tiny crowded Palestinian enclave under an Israeli blockade that has cut off electricity, clean water and fuel, with only small UN convoys of food and medicines getting in. In the temporary shelters where displaced Palestinians are crowding with their families hoping for safety from the bombs, people are starting to suffer from stomach complaints, lung infections and rashes, said Abu Taimi Nasser Hospital. Meanwhile, EU leaders has called on for pauses in Israeli bombings and Hamas rocket attacks to get humanitarian aid into Gaza after days of wrangling that highlighted divisions within the bloc over the broader Israel-Palestine conflict. In a declaration agreed at a summit in Brussels, the leaders of the Union's 27 nations expressed their gravest concerns for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Israel is a democracy attacked by Hamas, a terrorist organization. Israel has the right of self-defense in line with international law and international humanitarian law. There was a strong call from the leaders that Hamas must immediately release all hostages without any preconditions. And it was clear that through its terrorist activities, Hamas is also bringing harm to the Palestinian people. Hamas has provoked a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. For the Commission, it's very important that we continue to intensify our efforts to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The aid needs to reach Gaza unhindered and quickly.
Residents of southern Lebanon, which is the heartland of Hezbollah, are in dread of Israeli strikes. This reminds them of havoc created by Israeli strikes that killed over 100 people in 1996 and dozens in an airstrikes in 2006. They are fearful that if the conflict escalates, they might not be able to escape. Have a look at this report.
This rusted-out tank is Israeli, a relic from when Israel occupied parts of southern Lebanon back in 1996. That was a different conflict to the one fought today between Israel and Islamist militants. But this town, called Kana in Lebanon, is the heartland of one of those combatants, Israel's sworn enemy, Hezbollah. Many world leaders have expressed fear that the current war will expand into other countries. Some people in Kana believe that's not only inevitable, that they're used to it and might not be able to escape this time. This was smoke rising from the border Tuesday. Rabab Youssef lost her daughter in an Israeli airstrike in 2006. She says every now and then they create a war and you lose a family member. You give birth and you don't know if the child will stay with you.
What really impacted me was an interview with a Palestinian child, where the journalist asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" They said, "In Palestine, we do not grow up. They kill us. If we're walking to school, they kill us." Where are these children's rights that people around the world demand? I don't understand. Our only mistake is that we remained on our land. That's our only mistake. It's a mistake because we chose to protect our land, just like any other person living on their land in another country, in Europe or America.
Kana claims to be where Jesus performed his miracle of turning water into wine in the Christian Bible. It's also a stronghold for Hezbollah, which is both an armed faction and political force in the country. The crossfire has had devastating results in the past. The airstrike in 2006 that took Youssef's daughter killed 28 people, half of them children. Israel said at the time it was a mistake. An artillery strike in 96 hit a UN peacekeeping base here, killing over 100 people sheltering there, most of those women and children. Israel voiced regret at that incident, which prompted it to wind down that operation. Jamil Salameh survived the UN base and is now a security guard at the monument to it, a constant reminder of the collateral damage in war. He's saying, these are mass graves. We know their names, but we don't have their bodies.
My colleague Neha Khanna had a candid moment with Ehud Barak, former Israel Prime Minister. Take a listen.
We have with us former Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Ehud Barak. So first and foremost, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
So first and foremost, let me ask you, why the delay in Israel's ground invasion of Gaza? By all accounts, that is the next stage of the war.
I cannot go into the detail. I'm not even sure that I know all the details, but there are many considerations. This operation that has to go on the ground because we want to eliminate, as you have mentioned, the physical military capabilities of Hamas in Gaza Strip and put them out of power there. That cannot be completed just from the air, from airstrikes. So we have to deploy probably many thousands of soldiers on the ground, or probably a few thousand, but a long time and making more and more operations. But this operation is taking place under 4 different constraints. Number 1 is the hostages that you have already mentioned. Number 2 is the risk that it will spread into a regional war with the Hezbollah in the north, or probably others. Number 3 is the international law. Israel committed to the international law we don't want to repeat the standards of these barbaric terrorists, Al-Qaeda-like. And number 4 is the question, okay, assume that we finished. In 3 months from now, we took over Hamas and erased all its military capabilities. To whom we pass the torch, the ruling of the Gaza Strip. These are 4 constraints, and because they are interconnected and develop a long time, we cannot make trajectory. I cannot tell you what will happen. We have to trust our war cabinet and our Supreme Command of the Armed Forces.
So you've touched upon some very important points. I want to dwell on them one by one. But first, let me ask you, is there pressure from countries like the United States for Israel to not go ahead with a ground invasion?
No, I don't think that the United States pretends to be able to dictate to Israel. Israel is sovereign. We suffered a major blow, probably the most severe blow that we suffered since the establishment of Israel, which is about the same time of the establishment of India. And it was really unprecedented attack, slaughtering civilians. No freely elected government can afford sitting idle and not responding to it very forcefully. So it's not the case that we just invented it. We have to do it, and we will do it. And on the way, we will have to take into account all these constraints that I've mentioned.
Russia conducted missile launches as a rehearsal for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike, aligning with U.S. stance on test ban treaty. Moscow moved to revoke its ratification of the treaty amid tensions over Ukraine. President Putin's approval is pending. The move raises concerns about potential arms race and further nuclear tests worldwide. Have a look at this report.
Russia says these missile launches are part of a successful rehearsal for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike. That's how Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu characterized it to President Vladimir Putin in footage aired on Russian state TV. It's a show of force that coincides with Moscow moving quickly to revoke its ratification of a treaty banning nuclear tests. A de-ratification bill unanimously passed Russia's upper house of parliament on Wednesday. Putin will have the final sign-off. Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal and currently sees itself in an existential standoff with the West over Ukraine. Moscow says revoking the treaty's ratification will line it up with Washington's stance. The U.S. signed, but has never ratified the same document. If the United States continues to take no steps to fulfill its obligations, then this agreement will remain a sham. Upper House Speaker Valentina Matvienko told lawmakers. While the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty has never formally come into force, it has made nuclear testing taboo. Russia carries out exercises to test its so-called nuclear triad from time to time. The U.S. also carries out regular drills. Arms control experts say a test by either side could spark a new arms race and trigger more tests from other countries. Moscow says it has no plans to start testing unless Washington does it first.
Mercedes-Benz warns of a challenging electric vehicle market, citing intense price competition and supply chain issues. Despite a nearly 7% drop in pre-tax earnings to $5 billion in Q3, the company refrained from reducing prices. Chief Financial Officer Harold Wilhelm emphasized the industry's need for change. Shares fell 5% in response. Other car makers like Ford and Tesla have also cut prices this year to boost demand.
Mercedes-Benz says the market for electric vehicles is getting brutal, and it warns that could bite into profit margins over the coming months. The luxury car maker on Thursday posted a near 7% drop in pre-tax earnings. They sank to just over $5 billion in the third quarter. Mercedes said fierce price competition and supply chain issues were making the EV market a tough battle. The company says some rivals are selling electric cars for less than traditionally powered models, even though they cost more to make. Chief Financial Officer Harold Wilhelm said the status quo could not be sustainable for the industry. Mercedes shares fell around 5% in early trade following the warning. Car makers from Ford to Tesla have been slashing prices this year in a bid to prop up demand. Mercedes has largely refrained from following suit, but says inflation and other factors weighed on earnings over recent months. That echoes comments earlier in the week from Porsche, which said the luxury sector wouldn't be immune to global economic worries. On a more positive note, Mercedes said the industry was beyond the worst on inflation and energy costs.
Well, that's all in this edition of the Bulletin. Stay tuned to News 9 for further updates.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship